Hello, welcome back to CPR with our guest, Jeff Getting, County Prosecutor of Kalamazoo. And Jeff, I want to play for you. This is a really interesting movie. I really thought it was one of Denzel Washington's best roles that he played. It didn't get much play, and I don't think it got the best. I don't think it made a lot of money, actually. Probably lost money. But he got Best Actor for Golden Globes, and he was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor in this. And he plays a public defender. There it is, folks. It's called Roman J. Israel, Esquire. And of course, Esquire is an honorific for lawyers. But he always used that because most lawyers don't do that. But anyway.
Not anymore, at least.
But he plays kind of an odd character. Who's really not a litigator, but a researcher. And when his partner dies, then he has to do the litigation. And he's a really committed civil rights lawyer, devotes his whole life, doesn't have a personal life beyond that. And this is, we're going to play the scene after his partner has a heart attack. He has to take over, and he's coming and he's talking to the Assistant District Attorney of Los Angeles about a case. Anyway, so let's listen to it. Let's see if we can hear it.
This says William Jackson's his lawyer.
Well, Mr. Jackson had a heart attack this morning. I'm Roman Israel, his partner.
I didn't know Jackson had a partner.
Well, I don't have the patience for the butchery that occurs here. Mr. Jackson does.
You want a continuance?
What bail you offering?
No bail. He pleads to count one. I'll tell the judge and request the minimum 5 years. He's facing 15 at trial.
For a 17-year-old breaking and entering, now why don't we just get it over with and shoot him?
That's the offer. Do what you gotta do.
Well, he's not taking top plea, I can tell you that. I mean, you're already overcharging him. Let's talk about mitigating circumstances.
He was caught wearing a t-shirt with a gang symbol.
Like the flag pin on your belt.
5 years. That's as low as the people will go.
People, what people? There's no people. There's just you making a bullshit career climbing off. Come on, let's admit it.
Present it to your client.
His name is Langston. He's a high school junior in good standing, plays on the soccer team. All of this despite the fact that his father's in jail, his mother is in drug treatment. Due to a legion of forces beyond his control, he joined a gang for acceptance, family, protection. He has one prior minor offense. Each one of us is greater than the worst thing we've ever done.
Deep bows. Please, talk to your client. My conviction rate's 100%.
All right.
So, I don't know if you out in the audience could hear that. Could you hear it?
I could.
You could hear it? Okay.
Good.
I have some comments about that. I actually worked for the California Youth Authority, and I worked in the prison for the young.
Really?
Young.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I was a teacher, and mostly these were Hispanic gang members. There were some white gang members, not very many blacks as I recall, mostly Hispanic. And the thing about it is that these kids primarily become gang members, as Roman Israel talked about. There's belonging, family, and protection. And if they don't belong to a gang in a particular neighborhood, they're in jeopardy. Sure. They're out there all by themselves, and they can be hurt because they don't belong. And he talks about this young man. His father is in prison, and his mom is a drug addict, and that kind of thing. He's mitigating circumstances, and these are things that you do not have control over. These are cultural problems that need, other solutions. I think you agree with me that we need to do more about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are socioeconomic and cultural problems that, I can't touch that are leading people into these situations where then I
Right.
do end up having control.
And you probably have no choice, when they do commit a crime, especially a violent crime. Your choices are limited.
Very.
But what I wanted to comment on was this ADA, the assistant district attorney's attitude about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she is really burdened with having a lot of cases, but the Roman Israel also is burdened with having a lot of cases. And what FAF talks about is that the system would be better if we had more support for public defenders. And as you know, Jeff, if you are, I thought about the O.J. Simpson case, for example.
Okay.
When it first came out, and I was in L.A. I wasn't in L.A. at the time originally, but I lived in L.A. for a long time, and I thought it was just another celebrity. There was this case with this director, John Landis. I don't know if you know that case, but it was a helicopter accident. It was like 2 a.m. in the morning on the set, and these kids were killed, these Vietnamese kids. It was about the Vietnam War. And he should have been charged, but the prosecutor overcharged John Landis, and he had great lawyers, and he got off. I think she charged him with second-degree murder or something, rather than negligence or something like that. And the actor was killed too, Vic Morrow. I don't know, do you know that case?
No.
Oh, okay. So anyway, when O.J. Simpson came along, I thought, this is another celebrity. I didn't even think about the race issue. I just thought about, his, and the fact that he had all that money and resources made the difference.
Yeah, he had a lot of firepower.
A lot of firepower. And, if everybody had the best lawyers possible, it'd be a lot harder for you to convict people, because everybody would go to trial, and they would have the jury selection, which is probably 9/10 of the thing, right? Pretty much. They do this scientific analysis of jury selection and all that.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have the resources to do that. So anyway, but the thing about it is, what I heard in her voice was, this 100% conviction rate. Like, wow, that's really good. Like, that's a really good prosecutor. I don't think that's a really good prosecutor. I think a really good prosecutor thinks in terms of what's best for society, for everybody, including the person who's being charged. Because really, I don't like the term prosecutor. I think you represent the people.
Yeah.
The people of Kalamazoo County, the people of Michigan, and he's a people too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I think her attitude. Now, this is just a movie. It's a story. It's not a real story. It's not based on fact. But there is that attitude of a lot of prosecutors. Like my conviction rate and all that kind of stuff. And how that changes people's lives so much. This 17-year-old kid going to prison for 5 years. His chances of really making it are really diminished greatly.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
much so. And we've had a juvenile system since Grover Cleveland, and the idea of juvenile system is based on the reality that juveniles are different than grown-ups. In fact, a psychologist wrote a book basically saying that adolescence is a mental disease.
Well, they certainly aren't,
and so they should be
thinking
treated
the same way as an
He's
adult.
making the argument this kid should be treated differently. He did this breaking and entering. He had one minor conviction. And he's trying to convince her to, let's talk about mitigating. Let's lower the charges. Try to keep him out of prison. That's what I took from that.
And he's doing his job. He's doing a really good job at.
Well, he's not very good people prison.
Well, I haven't seen the movie.
Well, he's saying
just
he's saying
listening to
that
what he
that
says.
this bullshit charge, and you're doing it because you're ambitious, and
He's making the right arguments.
but in a very
But like you said, this is a movie. Okay,
Yeah.
There isn't an assistant prosecuting attorney in my office that has 100% conviction rate.
Okay.
It doesn't happen.
Does it happen anywhere?
Nor that I know of.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we view our jobs as prosecutors and the assistant prosecutors who work for me. It's not about what your conviction rate is. It's about doing justice.
Right.
And that means lots of different things. Yes, it does mean holding people accountable. Yes, it does mean making sure that victims are being well represented, but it also means looking at the outcome of the case in a way that's going to not just hold someone accountable, but to address those underlying factors as best we can that caused a person to come into the system, referring a case to drug court, and agreeing that if they successfully complete drug court, that the charges against them will be dismissed, so that they come out of it without that conviction, recognizing that our convictions have consequences outside of the criminal justice system, these collateral consequences that we know that a conviction will have in terms of a person's employment or future employability, their ability to get into college or get financial aid for college, their ability to get adequate housing or to qualify for subsidized housing. The decisions that we're making in the system and the outcome of our cases is impacting all of those things. It's excuse me, it's not just that immediate you're sentenced to jail or you're sentenced to prison or you're sentenced to probation, because there's this ongoing series of things, this cascade that happens when someone is convicted, and we have to be conscious of what our decisions are and how they are going to have those future impacts. And it's not, we talk about it in cases, usually in more severe cases, or more serious cases. We're impacting not just that person that's been charged with a crime, right? We're impacting his spouse, his family, his children, his employer. We're impacting a much broader community than just the individual person with the decisions that we're making. It's easy to become overwhelmed, with the number of cases that we handle and the number of prosecutors, assistant prosecutors that I have. Just like it's easy to become overwhelmed when you are a public defender or you're doing indigent defense. The reality is one of the things we talked about at the beginning of this, one of my criticisms of the offer of Locked In is when you focus on just one part of the system, and be critical of just that one part, you're ignoring the reality of the other players and their impact within the system. Criminal justice reform needs to happen, but it needs to happen across the board, not just one part. Mm-hmm. We need to spend more money in the state of Michigan on indigent defense. There isn't any question about that. We need to spend more money in Kalamazoo County on indigent defense. But the reality is when you look at spending more money on indigent defense, and you need to, mm-hmm. you also need to spend more money on the other parts of the criminal justice system. The American Bar Association has done studies and made recommendations that are being used in the indigent defense conversation here in the state of Michigan, that a lawyer in the criminal justice system shouldn't be handling more than 150 felonies or more than 400 misdemeanors, or a combination. You could do 200 misdemeanors and 75 felonies, for instance. But if you're doing 150 felonies, you shouldn't be doing any. Mm. If I apply those same numbers, those same standards to my office, the reality is that I should have twice as many assistant prosecutors doing criminal work than what I currently have.
Right.
Yes, we need to have more money in the system. Yes, there needs to be more defenders. Yes, they have to be better paid. And yes, that will result in a better system. Adequately funding the entirety of the system will result in better outcomes, period.
Okay.
Because we have more time to look at each person individually, mm-hmm. and recognize that they're a soccer player, that
right.
they're doing well in school, that they only have one prior minor offense, that they're only 17 years
right.
old, and that a 5-year prison sentence isn't the outcome that is going to be best, not just best for the defendant. Ignore what's just best for the defendant. Let's talk about what's best for our community.
Right.
Is that the outcome that is best for our community?
Yeah.
And, but in order to be able to do that, you have to have adequate funding across the system. You have to have adequate,
Right.
you have to have people that are capable of taking the time to work that case in a way that's going to consider what is the appropriate intervention.
Well, let's get into that because we're at a break. I think we're running a little over here, but let's get into that some more. We'll
Okay.
At the other side. So we'll be right back.